right, so welcome to the show. Today we are joined by a woman who's reshaping how the hospitality industry thinks about spirits and heritage. On the show, we talk a lot about the spirits and about the things that we drink, but not always spend as much time speaking about the people behind it all. Fabiola Santiago is a Zapotec mother, a public health expert, and a founder of Mi Oaxaca, nonprofit dedicated to preserving the indigenous roots of Oaxacan food and mezcal. Born in Santiago Matatlán, I'm butchering these words because I don't know them off the top of my head, but the world capital of mezcal. And raised in Los Angeles, Fabiola's perspective is uniquely binational. She spent a decade in the hospitality industry before turning her focus to high-level advocacy, including landmark research on wage theft and cultural appropriation. Sensitive topics that most people would dance around, but Fabiola is facing them head on. Recently named one of 2026 Imbebe's 75 people to watch. She's here to talk about the sustainability of people in the mezcal boom and how we can move beyond just selling a spirit to actually honoring the community that stewards it. Fabiola, welcome to the show and thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Now you can give me a hard time about mispronouncing some of those words. I welcome it.
Yeah, we can all practice. Those are very unique words for a lot of people.
Yeah, fair. How are you doing? I know that we spoke off camera. You've had a busy week. Tell us about yourself. How's everything going? And how do you not sleep? Because that's what it seems like when I look at you.
I definitely sleep. I sleep plenty, but I've been trying to wake up earlier because I want to get a little bit of a head start to the day. And now that my son is a little older and doesn't, wake up in the middle of the night, I can actually carve that in. But yeah, pretty good. Other than that, it's Friday, so it's just like, okay, we're just gonna get through these things or my task list so that I can feel good or good enough about enjoying my weekend.
Yeah, that's fair. It always feels like no matter what you're doing, there's always something else, right? There's something pending, but do you find yourself it's hard to kind of just disconnect or like always thinking about the next project?
Yeah, always doing too much. And then sometimes it feels like not enough at the same time. But yeah.
It's funny. Do you think that's a cultural thing? Because I always feel the same. I feel like if I'm not doing something, I'm wasting time. And it's kind of embedded from my family and all that.
I think there's part of it. I think for me, there's also this element of urgency in some places. And I don't know. I also attribute some of this to my Gemini nature, that I just need to have different things to be working on. So yeah, and I actually think it's more of a natural place or a natural way of approaching life where we want to do many different things and engage in different things, a diversity of activities throughout the week or a lifetime. I've never been a huge fan of the idea of staying in one career or in one place for decades. Or 30, 40 years. I think that's a slightly older generation, but there's so much stuff to learn. So yeah, I think it's more like the makeup of our lives that make it hard to just like be doing different things.
That's fair. I think that's funny too, because I had a conversation with my fiance and other friends, and they've been in their prospective industries for a prolonged amount of time, but then there's that newer generation and shift where it's like there's not as much emphasis on staying with the company for 40, 50 years. It's, hey, I want to do what drives me. I want to do something different. The companies don't look out for me like they used to. So let me go to something else. Whatever the reason is, people aren't staying in the same spots.
Yeah. I had a supervisor a long time ago who said, try to only stay at 3 to 4 years at any one place because that's how much time you'll need to learn a new skill and then move on to the next thing.
I love that. I love that approach. But for those at home, tell us about yourself, how you got started and your story and what you do now.
Well, right now I'm the founder of Mi Oaxaca and the executive director. And Mi Oaxaca is a nonprofit based in California. And we work generally at the intersection of cultural preservation and economic equity within the mezcal industry and Oaxacan cultural contributions. I started that work not because I went to Oaxaca and took a trip and fell in love with mezcal.
Mm-hmm. Because that's everyone's story. Like
That's the story.
everyone's story is I fell in love with the culture.
I fell in love with the culture and with, was driving in rural Mexico and
So what?
stopped by a village and got some mezcal. No, so I am from Santiago Matatlán.
Yeah, there's so many people right now. It's like that's my story. But
And the reason why I'm poking fun out at it, respectfully, jokingly,
all
yes, but
fun.
respectfully, is because there is not a lot of diversity of the stories around mezcal, the industry. It is when we talk about, like, we're just gonna get into it, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stories of people who have so much privilege, who discovered something and then take something cultural, something meaningful, something sacred to us and commodify it and make it into a business and just funnel it into this global industry or create a global industry. And yeah, considering that I'm from Santiago Matatlán, the world's capital of mezcal, at least that's what that's how we identify ourselves. I see the damage that the mezcal industry is causing, and has been causing over the last several years, decades now.
Yeah.
And that's why I do this work. Um,
Your passion does come through for those listening at home, and this, I know that you have a unique pathway to this, and we really want to dig into it. But those who haven't had the opportunity to look you up online at home, like that passion comes through, and everything you say and speak to that to why you got here and started running this. You have a very diverse background and everything, but you did spend some time in hospitality at some point as well. And this transition happened during the pandemic?
yeah, no, that was
Yeah.
actually before the pandemic. My
Okay.
hospitality industry started, I think around 2002 or so. I was in high school. So I started working at a restaurant.
Okay.
And worked in the restaurant industry for close to 10 years.
Mm.
I worked as a server most of the time. Most of my hospitality industry career was as a server, but I also did other roles, cashier, hostess, busser, runner, all the stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I started. And this was in LA. That's where my family migrated when we left Oaxaca, when we left Matatlan.
Mm.
And the majority of the hospitality industry in LA specifically is ran by Oaxaqueños, people from Oaxaca, a lot of Oaxacan people. So the
Oh.
very first restaurant that I worked at was a salad bar. It's one of these like chain salad bars place, healthy or whatever. And yeah, the majority of the folks who were working there are Oaxaqueños. So it was really interesting because we knew each other, that we all knew that we were from Oaxaca. And so we would actually identify each other with our pueblos. So nicknames
Oh.
were just based on like, oh, dile al camarón, which is because he's from El Camarón, right?
Yeah.
So like you don't even associate them with their names. It's like their association is with their pueblos, which I think is an important thing to consider when considering identity and attributing mezcal to Mexican identity. I push against that notion. And yeah, I push against that notion for several reasons, but one of them is like specificity to place, because not all of Mexico has a history of producing mezcal, and not the entire state of Oaxaca has a history of producing mezcal. Though this industry is crafting a narrative that mezcal is synonymous with Mexico and mezcal is like a spirit
Mm.
of Mexico. And I think that's just wrong.
Yeah, it's misinformation. And to be fair, part of the reason why I was really excited to get you on the show was to dig deeper into that, because especially as Americans, it's very, rose colored glasses of like the story narratives that they want to depict of this historical, like, oh, this history is like, but it's not the right history. It's not the right story. They're missing pieces of it because, when has America ever reshaped history? But earlier when you said about like discovering something, it made me laugh because I'm like, that's not the first time. But
Yeah.
what were the other reasons that you felt like you wanted to kind of distinguish, push against that identity? Like you said that there were other reasons, didn't want to get into it, but feel free if you want to.
I mean, well, there is a very strong anti-Indigenous sentiment towards people from Oaxaca within the Mexican community. And I think most people know that.
Yeah.
But of course, like publicly, it's not something that is talked about. It's very brushed to the side. But just like in a lot of places, like when we think about the United States and the different regions across the United States, when we think of the South, there is a history associated with it.
Mhm.
When we think about the East Coast or the West Coast, there is a history, there's a culture associated with it. So same thing, people homogenize and simplify Mexican culture, but Mexico is also quite diverse. And when we look at Oaxaca, it's even more diverse, like 16 ethnic groups and indigenous languages in just one state. That's like a huge majority. And that's not true for the northern Mexico. Not
Mhm.
to say that there isn't, but there is less indigenous, um, there's a smaller indigenous population in northern Mexico than there is in southern Mexico. And I mean, these are kind of topics that we cover in some of our culture educational courses at Mi Oaxaca. But we talk about the geography, the terrain of Oaxaca, and how people were able to preserve and not be as colonized as other regions in northern Mexico. Because you go to northern Mexico, it's a lot more white, Europeanized, mestizo folk. And so it's that contention and that othering between northern and southern Mexico is real.
Yeah, kind of like
Mhm.
a civil disagreement, I guess. I wouldn't say it any other way, but you said there's a kind of a fine line. Like, is it like a line where people just don't always see eye to eye, or this is?
No, I mean, there's just like an anti-indigeneity, right? Like, meaning that, and that's a whole topic that we can
Oh yeah.
discuss, but it's just like simply like people thinking that that indigenous peoples know less, or the discrimination
Uh,
that has experienced,
mhm.
the disenfranchisement, the exclusion, the social, political, economic exclusion that Oaxaqueños have experienced within Mexico has real implications. And this mezcal industry shows me that right away, because when we look at decision-making power, when we look at brand ownership, when we look at who is designing and who the industry benefits, it's not producers, it's not campesinos, it's not farm workers, it's not indigenous peoples as a whole. And I was thinking, I think about this a lot, but and it's hard to say sometimes because yeah, I named the elephant in the room, and most people know about it or see it, but they will not name it, which is that Mexicanos from Mexico City in particular, as well as other states throughout the Republic, have been going to Oaxaca to learn how to make mezcal. They have paid or encouraged producers or invited producers to teach them how to make mezcal for like pennies, for crumbs. Um, and so when we think about like Oaxaca as an economically excluded and disadvantaged state, when there's economic imbalances, people will often
Leaving.
do work that is not well paid because it's something and it's better than nothing. There was a recent piece by the Associated Press that did a 90-second piece on like the mezcal boom, and I don't know if people paid attention to that. Like, I don't think people are paying attention to the nuanced languages and the language that producers are saying, which is like, yeah, there's a lot of deforestation happening, but like, who's going to pay us? Like, this is an opportunity for us. And so I think that's the part that I put a lot of responsibility on folks who benefit from the mezcal industry to do better.
100%. And that
Hmm.
makes complete sense. Like you said, if it's a disenfranchised group that needs something, anything, and like they're gonna do the thing to take care of themselves, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, and it's something that honestly, even when the show was doing the research to interview you, it was eye opening, and you would think as someone that spends so much time with spirits and talking to everyone and speaking to everyone that this would be more prominent and spoken about, but it's relatively unknown. It kind of like because people don't want to know how the sausage is made. They don't want to know the bad parts of it.
Yeah,
So we're not going to glorify that. We're not going to talk about that because then they can't sell you the product,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
it becomes problematic as opposed to something that was they want to present as this is fun and this is great and all this stuff. And when I started doing more research, like hold on, like this is not ever spoken about. Like I don't hear these things. So I was glad that I ended up looking more into you and everything that you were doing. Um, it, I know that we kind of jumped a little
I
bit.
know, I feel.
Oh, you're 100% fine. It's just because I know that our listeners probably want to know more about like your what was the like aha moment, or where was that time in your life where you're like, hey, this is something I want to pay attention to, and this is something I want to turn my attention, my focus on, because going to a nonprofit isn't an easy step.
No.
There's a reason why it's called nonprofit. Like nonprofits aren't necessarily things that people are running to go and do. A certain type of great human being, and I'll say that. That's a lot of pressure, time, energy, effort, and emphasis, and you have to have a lot of drive for it. So, if you had to share with us, what was that moment where you said, "Hey, if not me, then who?"
Yeah, it was actually during a wage theft campaign that happened in Oakland. So I moved from LA to the Bay Area around 2013 as soon as I got my green card. And I continued working in the public health sector as a community researcher. I worked for this national nonprofit that used public health research and science to benefit society, so on social change and social policy. And at the time, I was doing a wage theft research to understand what the impacts of wage theft are, which of course impacts immigrant, low paying workers, women of color, folk who work in a lot of the service industry, so restaurants, car wash workers, laborers. I mean, the roles that are taken by brown immigrant people. I need to be more specific because identifiers sometimes, yeah, they shift. But anyways, there was an allegation against a upscale Mexican restaurant that they stole the wages of a Oaxaqueña, stole her recipes. They fired her and didn't pay her. And there was a local group that was working with the person who was oh my gosh, what's the word? She was what's the word? Oh my God, it just escaped me. But anyways, she was running the campaign,
It's Friday.
right? It is Friday. And I think that was the moment because I'd worked so hard for this research on this research. It was like over a year long, working with coalitions in LA, specifically because that's where the ordinance was introduced. And then, the research was, I think, extremely good. So it was used in the state legislature and like it was included in the judicial brief to also curb wage theft at the state level. And I felt really proud of that, but then I realized, well, policy change doesn't actually affect real change. It's so slow. And then that was the moment when like I felt the anger, the frustration, the injustice, the like the sentiment of Mexicans and Mestizo people using indigenous culture and indigenous peoples when it benefits them and then disposing of us. That was that evidence for me, right?
Yeah.
That's what it materialized in that way. And then they could say that they're people of color owned, right? On like Yelp or Google or whatever.
Mm-hmm,
It could say
mm-hmm.
that it's Mexican owned, and people believe that stuff. People think that an identity is equivalent to values and practices and dignity and respect, and they're not, obviously. So that was the moment that I was like, wow. I'm like, F this. Like, if they can have a restaurant, so can I, because I grew up not in the kitchen, but my mom taught us how to cook from a very young age. And I was always very proud of knowing how to cook. And I still enjoy to cook. And also, I'm from Matatlan. I'm like, if anybody should have a mezcaleria, it should be me.
Yeah.
And compared to LA in the Bay Area, there's a much smaller Oaxacan population, much, much smaller. And this was in the era where like a bunch of Oaxacan inspired restaurants were just popping all over the place.
Oh,
And, for consumers, they think that this is Oaxaca, like that's their introduction to Oaxacan cuisine, but it's misrepresentation, misinformation, cultural appropriation. And I was like, well, that's not fair. I feel consumers deserve something better anyways. So that's when I applied to the food incubator, La Cocina, and got accepted. But then the pandemic happened at the same time, for better or for worse,
Mhm.
at least for my situation or that specific situation. And I went back to Oaxaca. Because I just, yeah, it was just, what do you, what it, not lockdown. I think I read somewhere we shouldn't
Quarantine.
use that
Well,
term
yeah.
because we could never know what lockdown is. Like a real lockdown is like pretty, I think they do that in jail. So they're like, don't use that word, but it's shelter in place. Okay, you can edit
Yes.
that part out.
Something like that. It's fine. We'll figure it out.
I go on a lot of tangents. That's my style. But anyways,
I
uh,
promise you are on the right show. Like you're
great.
good. But so the pandemic happened. You went
Yeah,
back
the
to
pandemic
Oaxaca,
happened. Shelter in place was just making it really impossible for me to move forward with the food. With the food concept, we
especially
couldn't
in
do our.
Cali,
Say that again?
especially in California, where there's such a
Yeah.
compact amount of people. Like the interactions there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we couldn't do our commercial kitchen training, which was something that we were that was like the next phase.
Mhm.
So I went back to Oaxaca. I was like, well, I'm not gonna more just pay rent and just, have my kid get called in because, there's bad air quality. It was around the time that the Sonoma fires
Yeah.
were happening.
Mhm.
It was all at the same time, and I'm like, this is too much. I'm out. So we went back to Oaxaca. We went back to Matatlan. And then, like, a different experience, a different story was happening there. So, there wasn't really this like one aha moment, but yes, like the wage theft campaign in Oakland was like one of those moments. And then going back to Oaxaca and talking to family and producers and saying, like, oh, yeah, like, blah, blah, blah. These folks are coming in to buy mezcal a granel. Granel is like, batch mezcal.
Mhm.
And they took it, but they haven't came and paid me. And that was like, heard that several times. I started connecting with other local folks and started visiting other producers. And yeah, similar stories of like, oh yeah, this person is getting caught up in like a really unfair contract where like they're being asked by a brand to produce like 10,000 liters per month. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's just like, well, you can't do that. Like this is a small batch artisanal
Yeah.
thing. Um, and so, putting folks in those kinds of situations and like, I don't know the research, but I know that it exists, that poverty creates different types of decisions, right? Our executive functioning is not at its highest when we are in situations of stress, of poverty, of need. And that's exactly what the industry is taking advantage of.
That is a brilliant way. I mean, no, it's 100% right. I
Mic
think,
drop.
no, it's 100% right. Yeah, you got to stop. All right, guys, we're done. No, but I completely agree. And I think we see it with, there's the whole, you talk about the social dynamic of people who are poor end up staying poor because of there's making the decisions that aren't necessarily focused on long-term impact. They're focused in the short term because that's the immediate concern in front of them. I have to take care of paying this bill. I have to get rent. I have to pay for electricity. And they're in this giant vicious cycle of you're not making the long-term decisions or the bigger decisions. You're acting out of survival to an extent.
Yeah.
And I'm oversimplifying it for the sake of we could do a 5-hour podcast if we wanted to. But, and that is that's such a heartbreaking thing to know that, and there's always a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy. There's always a theory, especially as a Hispanic dude that knows people from Dominican Republic who have talked about poverty and how people are treated. And then when I tell my friends about it, they're like, I had no idea. I just thought it was like all inclusives and stuff. It's like, no, there's other things going on. And you often forget that the disconnect from reality to what's put in front of you isn't the same. So you were there. You spent time with the people there and you're like, enough is enough. Like I have to do something.
Yeah. Something like that. At the same time, I was like, I had my Google alerts on for Mezcal. And it's just like, on one hand, I'm seeing like the reality of what's happening in the Pueblo and hearing people's stories, like
Mm-hmm.
firsthand anecdotes. And then I'm like getting these notifications from Google Alert. This new Mezcal brand, Mezcal in like Portland, Mezcal in New York, Mezcal in LA, just Mezcal everywhere. This new brand, this new restaurant, this new bar. And I'm just like, these are not compatible. Like, the math is not mathing here.
Yeah.
Mm. And then I just, started ranting online. That's kind of how it started.
By the way, I did see your recent video of you cooking while having a kind of discussing recent events because I just find it funny because you said, I enjoy cooking. It was like your very first video I saw is you prepping food in the kitchen and talking about some pretty heavy stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's on brand. That's on brand so far. She's true to her word.
Yeah.
I will commend you that feels very genuine, right? Like there's conversations, especially at least in my household, kitchen is a communal place. So a lot of your best conversations happen around the dinner table, around a bar, whatever. But if someone's cooking, you're in there with them, you're talking to them. So commend you on that video format. I was like, okay, I like this. But definitely on brand. I know that you spoke a little bit about like the mezcal in America and all that big boom. We kind of skipped over it, but when you tried mezcal in America, what was that like? Was this like, what was the approach? What was going through your head?
That was in my mid-20s, early-ish 20. I was obviously over 21, so maybe 22 or so. And this was in LA. I was still living in LA. I first kind of felt excited because I think LA is one of the first places where like mezcalerias or mezcal bars popped up. So I went to one of them and I was excited initially. And then that's when I started seeing like mezcal guerrilla marketing for this specific brand that's, used that tactic. And I was like, ooh, like my culture on a menu at a bar, like first it's pride, right? Like, yeah, I was excited. And then, so anyways, went to that place and it was horrible. But it was in retrospect. I think it took a while for me to realize that was a really shitty experience. It wasn't an immediate because in the moment, just also like, whatever, you're out at night, a bar, it's busy, it's loud. You're just there for the company, right? Or not just, but like there to hang out with people. But yeah, in retrospect, it was like, oh my God, she was really cold. I know in the moment I didn't like it, but I ignored that feeling. I didn't get stuck on like, she was rude, but she was very rude. A white woman with like just unfriendly, like just lack of hospitality. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how do you guys work in hospitality and like so inhospitable?
I see it all the time. There's so
all
many
the time.
All the time. And like, people don't owe me anything. I understand. And I keep that in mind because I have so many friends that are bartenders, servers, all that. But there are times I'm just like, bro, you sure you want to be in this job? Like there are other options.
There really are. I get it. As somebody who worked in the service industry and worked as a server, customers can be difficult. And I'm not of the mindset that like customers always right. Absolutely
God,
not.
No.
Right.
Absolutely not.
And I also have seen, have been more times than I've wanted, had shitty service with people that I'm like, why are you even working here? Like, why are you here? Like, your service sucks. The busser is a much better server.
Yeah, that's how I've been there. I've been in places where I'm like, oh, this is an awful experience. I will never come back. But whatever. But you had it in retrospect. You look back and you're like, this was terrible. But the mezcal itself left.
I don't remember much of it, honestly, but
really?
Don't remember. It wasn't like a few things. One, I didn't have the language in that era to understand mezcal in the ways that I do now. And I'm not just talking about like the language around organoleptics. I'm talking about like the understanding around the production and the specificity around regions, with producers, etc. And I'm not by any means saying that I'm like know my stuff, but compared to my 20s, I didn't have that language. If I remember, I don't know if I'm gonna go and I'm gonna guess. I don't know. There's no way to verify because in my so in my memory, I think I opted for our mezcal that was made in Matatlan because that's come on now, I'm from there.
Yeah.
So let me check it out.
I felt like
and in
home.
this time, I don't think I had my green card yet. So that's why like it meant something to be able to drink it at a bar.
I could see that. I could not the same vein. I'm Dominican rums. There are times that like I search, I'm like, oh my God, I really want to try this. And then pretty recently, actually, a friend, Justin, from Otto's High Dive, I told him, oh, I bought this Dominican rum. And he's like, hey man, that one adds additional sugar and some other things. I would be careful about that brand. It's not as hot, like as good as it's going to present itself. I was like, what? And I researched it. I'm like, he is not lying at all. He runs one of the like one of the most popular rum bars out here in Orlando. So when I showed him the picture, he knew exactly the brand and all that. I was like, damn. And as a Dominican dude, I was looking forward to something in my culture or something. I was like, oh, I hope this is fantastic. And I'm like, oh, it wasn't. Oh, it wasn't.
I mean, that's the majority of alcohols.
Yeah. I'm hearing that more and more recently, especially
Yeah.
with I won't say those brands, not that their sponsors are ever beyond, but some of the brands that got caught with their mislabeling and misrepresenting their agave spirits and using
Yeah.
cane sugar. I'm like,
Yeah. I think that makes my job a little bit hard because one of the most frequent questions that I get is, so what mezcal brand do you recommend? And they're just so limited. I'm like, I don't know.
I'm gonna
Like,
ask that too at the end of this. So I wouldn't even lie to you now that you said it that you have been asked, but it is difficult, right? I think especially with the influx of information and everyone being able to do this research or find things out and learn more. And the fact of the matter is people can't hide as much as they used to be able to, because someone with a smartphone could find out the true more details about things. But it's kind of like the consumers have changed so much that transparency is important, and as well that people are being more critical of when they catch someone's hand in a cookie jar. And I was like, nope, you're canceled, you're ruined, blah blah. But it still doesn't happen as fast as it should. As much as, especially now we're having this conversation in this interview, I'm certain that if more people knew about the truth of what goes into getting mezcal and all those and people getting taken advantage of, there might be some more cancelings coming. But go ahead.
yeah. My hope is that people do get educated. That is the goal with Mi Oaxaca that we're working on, is that people do get educated about where their mezcal comes from and that they shift their behaviors accordingly.
Yeah.
It's a really hard, well, I don't know. Yeah, no, it's a hard aim. We're aiming pretty high because even as individuals, sometimes we have these goals of like sleeping more, drinking more water, and like, shoot, it's just hard to change behavior.
I didn't know we were gonna get personal. I don't know if you gotta come at me like that, Fabiola.
I mean, my background is in public health, and so that's like approach to understanding change behavior is from that area that if we want to see behavior change, whether that's at the individual or like the social level, we first have to change attitudes. We have to change people's minds, their understanding, education, right? Once people have enough information, or hopefully the information that they need to bring about some changes, but that's the hardest part, because people can have information. They can know this is horrible for you, for your health, for the planet's health, for the workers' health, and still engage in that. We're very destructive, self-destructive being.
Yeah, 100%.
Especially now.
Especially nowadays. We won't get into that. But yeah, especially nowadays, people would have all the information, but it's sometimes too difficult or slightly inconvenient. I mean, a lot of people know that certain foods are probably awful for you, but it's easy. And it's just easy to ignore it. Oh, it's just once, blah, blah, blah. It's not that big of a deal. It's one person. Meanwhile, it does have a major impact. I at least think when it comes to spirits, there's more of a selection to that. I think that there could be a bigger emphasis on making the efforts to get the things, the spirits that are not lying about what's inside of them, not taking advantage of the people who make it and are true to the heritage of it. There's so many options. You don't have to drink every single day. You could wait until the thing comes in the mail and have it. Like, there are options there.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just me on my high horse that thinks that big deal. You got to drink something else today. Like, I don't understand, but whatever. I'm sure someone's going to write me in the comments and say that I'm a jerk. But the commodity trap, I know we spoke about it, seeing that massive global demand for mezcal. But the being vocal about the extraction and theft in the industry. What's the biggest misconception that the average consumer has that when they see words like artisanal or ancestral, like on the label? Like, what's something that you wish more people knew when we're talking about this information?
I mean, that those terms are made up words. They came about with the denomination of origin when it was established in 1994. So for producers, before this formal industry, there was they didn't have, those were not the words that they would use to describe their mezcales. I mean, that's a nuanced conversation, but I think I say that to jolt people.
Mhm.
And then we can talk about like the nuances of what I mean about that.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's made up. That's made up. Just because you say we see like a mezcal that's ancestral at a restaurant or a bar or a bottle shop or whatever, it doesn't say who is
The
uh,
ancestor.
making it necessarily if it doesn't have, I don't know, and I have mixed feelings about putting the producer's name on the label because we don't know if they're actually getting properly compensated, right?
Uh,
It's interesting, right? Because mezcal has is linked to place and heritage in that way, where like certain, like for example, the community of Santa Catarina Minas is very well known for making mezcal in ollas de barro. But in Matatlan, there also used to be an era when mezcal was made in ollas de barro, the clay pots. Um, but now we're seeing more communities start to use that because they have an interest. Like it's a higher value mezcal type. Um, and yeah, I think like one of the examples that I've talked or like one a dialogue that I've had multiple times with a friend who's also a well, his family's the producers and he's out here. He's like, if you look at the standards or like las normas 070 for mezcal, technically, a gringo can go to Oaxaca and put up a mezcal and buy the ollas de barro and contract a producer, and the producer can make the distillate and he can call it ancestral, and people are okay with that. But if you think about actual cultural preservation, a white man should not be able to do that, or anybody who's foreign should not be able to do that.
mhm.
If we are to talk about and actually have a denomination of origin with integrity. But I've done a very light research on understanding the denomination of origin, and I know that it started in France and it has like good intentions. But for some reason, it doesn't work in like Latin American countries. In Mexico, at least with mezcal, it's not working well because it's like whole regions that didn't have a history to the heritage are now able to benefit or are able to make a cultural product that they have no linkage to.
Huh.
That's the stuff that people don't know.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. That is did not know that they could do that. Like I've heard about. I think the most I've really it's dawned on me in the past is when we see celebrity backed brands that why are the guys from Breaking Bad making tequila? Like
I mean, they're not going to France, right? And starting a like a cognac or champagne or like other products that have a denomination of origin. They're
Mhm.
going to Mexico where those the designation is in theory there, like, but it's in practice is not actually rooted in integrity.
Yeah, and that's without knowing all that research. That I always had a bad vibes and feelings when I saw those people on those brands, not specifically to any race or origin, but those that were like someone who I knew wasn't coming from there. Someone who the celebrity, I'll just treat those as like the outsiders. Like someone's going over there and exploiting a spirit and a history and a product that they have no historical connection to. Always threw me off. I was like, one, I always assumed it was a poor product because of who they were. They weren't connected to it. It's like going into I want to go to a Cuban restaurant and there's not a single Cuban person working there. They kind of like, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if this is going to be as good as I hope it is. It's like that's what was on the surface, the simple way of me approaching it. But knowing more of this, there's some deeper roots in making sure that those people are actually the right people making profit off of it. I'm so glad that you are speaking about this in such a high capacity and often. I'm gonna post your stuff everywhere I can, or
Thank you.
earlier because I think it's important, and I think that these stories aren't told enough.
Well, it's like, it's interesting because like people say that they don't like to take political, they don't like to be political. And like mezcal is like probably, well, food is very, very political. But when we
Yeah,
talk about mezcal and the agave distillates industry, I'm like, y'all are some drama ass people. Like y'all are dramatic, unnecessarily dramatic about stuff.
that is the realest.
Unnecessary.
That's the realest thing about everyone. So many people are so dramatic.
Yeah. I mean, so like tequila, I like to, this is like quick story,
Please do.
quick nugget. So like with tequila, right? Like it also has a denomination of origin, and that one was established in 1974, so 20 years before mezcal. And for that one, that has like a very like telenovela dramatic kind of history of based on what I've read so
Like
far.
change the lights and music.
Because because like Tequila Jalisco is like one of the main places where tequila can be made, along with other like regions. But then, and they're kind of all close to each other. But then there's Tamaulipas, that's like on the other side, that also has a denomination of origin. So I don't know all the names and all the players, but the short story or the short of it is that somebody in tequila, big brand, was like, "Oh, I need somebody to like cultivate tequilana, agave tequilana to make tequila," and so they had somebody in Tamaulipas grow it, and then blah blah blah, things are happening, and then basically that producer or that brand was like, "Actually, we don't need it anymore," and that family or that those folks were in politics, and so they're like, "What am I going to do with all of these like agave?" Well, they use their political power to get Tamaulipas denomination of origin.
How?
That's how it works.
What the hell? Oh, corruption everywhere.
So, I again, like it's a beautiful story. It eases the tension of the world when we say that mezcal is Mexican culture, except that when we peel
Mhm.
layers of what those things actually mean, we realize that we're not so put together.
Oh, this is
I
gonna be
know.
interesting.
I'm the bearer of bad
No, you're
news.
not the bear. People need to know this. You can't put your head in the sand and ignore these things, and it's important
Yeah.
because
I think that's I think that's one of the most critical things that's missing in the hospitality industry is people having political, economic, and historical understanding of spirits. Because
yeah,
people know about brands, the production process. I don't go to tastings because most of them are going to be the same. They're going to tell you where it's made, how long it took for this plant to grow, who the producer is, what it tastes like, the flavors, the aromas, the blah, the this or that. No shame to that. That's just oversaturated. What isn't available is stuff that Mi Oaxaca does, which is like, let's talk about terrain, let's talk about geography, let's talk about geography through a feminist, indigenous lens. Let's talk about history and economics and politics, the uncomfortable stuff, because humans, like, no one can promote a culture if you're not also bringing along the ugly parts, the parts that are unfair, and the parts that are actually going to ensure that we continue to have delicious mezcal in the future.
yeah. I think that even as just from a consumer perspective, I'd like to know the facts behind what I'm consuming. I'd like to know that I'm on board with what's going on to the people that are making these things. I think that it's important as a consumer to know that you are comfortable with the origin of this. So yeah, you might need to know the ugly truth because that's part of it, and it's so funny to me when people's like, I don't want to know how the sausage is made. I don't want to know all this. You just want to be blissfully ignorant. And to each their own, but I don't think that's a fair way to live because there are some people
Yeah.
who just don't know that there's more. And I think that choice should also be presented. Like, hey, I want to tell you the truth. You decide what you want to do. But
Yeah, exactly, right? That's our public health approach. Here's the information. Ultimately, you get to decide what you want to do with this information. Hopefully, some people, change their behaviors, and not everybody will. And
yeah,
that's where personal choice comes into play.
yeah, so many people could read Surgeon General warns against, and they're still doing what they do. But at least give them that information. I think that's where with mezcal, it's not as predominantly afforded to everyone. So your program is brilliant. I wish I knew about it sooner. Um, well, I know that you've spoken about it, and you put the emphasis on the sustainability of the people and what that spirit of Oaxaca. Sorry, it's been that kind of day. It's been on the phone all
That's
day.
good.
That there are families that can no longer afford to even live there, and how that's having an impact. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and why that happens, or what happens to the spirit of the families, and what I don't know, just that
Yeah.
context.
I think that experience is more particular to people who live in Oaxaca City,
Mm-hmm.
where that's where like a lot of the touristification, the displacement, the gentrification is happening, where longtime local folk, people who are native to the state can't afford to live there anymore because now gringos, and by the way, when Mexicans or people in Mexico use the word gringo, they refer to any color as long
Yeah,
like if
foreigner.
you're yeah, exactly. So that in the pueblos, it's a little bit different because we're governed by usos y costumbres. A lot of the pueblos are, not all of them, but the mezcal producing pueblos that I know of, let's see, no, there's got to be some that don't use usos y costumbres. So usos y costumbres is customary law. And that came about after around like the Mexican Revolution that gave pueblos originarios and pueblos the right to govern themselves. It's way more complex, and I think I know much less than I want to know. Not that I want to know, that I need to know. So
Yeah.
I don't, anyways, I'm not an expert in that field. But the point is, in our pueblos, you're not going to see homelessness. You're not going to see like there's poverty, but there's not going to be homeless. It's not
Okay.
like poverty there is different than poverty here.
Yeah, it is.
So like they're not going to necessarily, folks are not going to experience like that type of displacement where they have nowhere to go. But I do, in the 90s, I mean, that's the displacement happened because mezcal didn't have a denomination of origin. Mezcal was not uh appreciated as like this spirit that it is today. It was a spirit for poor, indigenous, working class people. It was something that was yucky for the general Mexican population. So that's what led a lot of people to migrate and leave my pueblo. Like there's a huge wave of out migration in the 80s that happened in our pueblo. Um, but today, I think people are actually going back, not both by force,
Yeah.
with immigration raids and everything, and also kind of like the fear of getting deported, people preferring to just like self-deport is, I think, the phrase that folks use. So I don't know that there's necessarily displacement in the pueblos,
Okay.
but for sure in the city.
And
And it is attributed to like
the boom.
Oaxaca's culinary wealth.
That is unfortunate that yeah, I have so many opinions. Oh, so many damn opinions. Earlier I was gonna say something, but yeah, it's my show. Fuck ICE. So
Exactly.
I can say what I want. But earlier you spoke about indigenous feminism, and off camera we spoke a little bit about having that conversation about how Mi Oaxacan. I need a better Friday.
It's okay. We can practice just like me in Spanish, right? And then Oaxaca,
Oaxaca.
it's like it has like the W sound at the
Oaxaca.
beginning, like Oaxaca.
Oaxaca. This is happening
Yeah.
live, and I'm not editing this out. Oaxaca.
I think that's great because
Oaxaca.
people are like, wait, how do you pronounce that word every single time? Because we're a nonprofit,
Oaxaca.
so I'll get calls or whatever, and it's like
Oaxaca.
Waxaca. I'm like, oh, nobody knows how to pronounce.
Oaxaca. And I'm Dominican. I speak Spanish, but Oaxaca is not a
It's
word I
hard,
practice
yeah.
all the time. Damn it. No. So,
Yeah.
speaking about indigenous feminism and the role that women play in this historical in the history of this, we sorry we how is it that your work goes towards ensuring that women get the professional recognition in the historical context?
Yeah. Well, part of our programming at Mi Oaxaca entails storytelling, and that means giving the mic to specifically diasporic, immigrant women and matriarchs, not just in Mezcal. In fact, we're not too focused in Mezcal in that area for several reasons, but sharing the mic and amplifying their voices. And here's why. Because they're going to understand the embedded inequities within the mezcal industry in ways that a producer in a pueblo who has never migrated is going to understand. They're going to understand it very differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like another story that's coming to mind that I shared a conversation that I had long ago with a white woman who works kind of within the mezcal industry. And, just asking like, yeah, what's your experience like as a white woman going into the pueblos? And, she said, yeah, I learned from the producers, like, this is what I do, like, da, 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 da. I'm like, Do you see, I'm like, do you recognize that you're getting the male's perspective on this? Because if, and then this is because I know I'm from the pueblo, I know how we
Yeah.
operate. I mean, because a lot of the women, when visitors come, and if it's white people, they're immediately sent to the kitchen to start making food or drinks or whatever, but they're not part of like the main conversation. They're not really part of like the stories. I think that's changing, and I think that that actually encouraged this person to try to change her approach.
Mhm.
And she acknowledged it. She said, "You're right. Like every time I go in, as soon as I usually talk to the producer, and it's usually the male, and then the woman go in the kitchen." And I'm like, yeah, so you're going to have a very biased perspective. And here's the thing, even if you had a chance to talk to them, you don't have trust with them. They're not going to share with you whatever it is that they truly want to share or think or whatever, whatever their stories are, because you would have to build trust with them. Anyways, it's a little bit nuanced and a little bit complicated, but now as there have been, I think, this was like over 5 years ago, there has been more of an effort to amplify women's stories or mezcaleras and mezcal producer, female women producers. My criticism of like the current approach is that it's still pretty tokenizing, right? It still has this narrative of like, oh, women finally getting the recognition or like highlighting women producers or things like that. Um, Without really I don't know. I feel like there's something missing. I can't put my finger on it, but I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it's a very transactional way of getting people's stories.
Okay.
And so, in the sense that like those stories are shared for the purposes of amplifying a brand's image, the branding, right?
Ah,
Marketing of a brand, to show like, look, we're highlighting women in mezcal, you know? Or
it's
like there's like a nuance, there's like undertones of like struggle porn in the sense that like, oh, like this is the first, or like this child or this whatever woman was a child or learned how to make mezcal when they were a child. And I mean, I get it. Like a lot of stories are like that. I don't know. There's just something that feels transactional about those stories though.
even the term struggle porn, like when really breaking that down, it resonates with a lot of people because there's so many people that buy, oh my god, the story behind this or the come up stories, blah blah, blah, like all this, like I know that people go through hardships and they they resonate with it, and it's, or they feel for it, or they want to support, they think they're doing the right thing or helping or trying to support something like that. But if it is being transactional, like you said, where it's also almost just like, hey, we're the different kind of brand. I simplifying it again, equating it to like when Black History Month or something like that, and every brand, or Pride Month, every brand now suddenly has a pride colored something. It's like, oh yeah, we support blah blah blah. It's like, no, you're still selling me the product, and this is how you attract us.
Yeah.
Like it almost like just to make a buck from a different
That's
approach.
That's a really good comparison or analogy. I think that's what it is, right? It's like, oh, here comes, yeah, whatever month it is for whichever people of color it is, like,
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, but that's not actually creating change, right? Like, what's the impact here? Like, or what's changing? Like, what's the platform or the brand doing to change the
that part.
condition? Right? And like create a more matriarchal society, create societies where like women don't face such inequities. Like what is actually changing? Because otherwise it's what it, it's just like,
It's a shtick. It's a gimmick for a month,
mhm.
or for the time
Yeah,
being. It's the hot thing to be aware of, socially aware of these things. Like
yeah.
I completely agree with you. I don't. I've whenever a brand is suddenly taking a stance on something, I was like, there has to be more here. Like
Hmm.
you never took a stance before. Like what are we doing here? It's like, what's the money actually going to? What are these things like Project Red or any of these organizations that say like, hey, this money goes to this? How much of that money goes to that? Like
Yeah.
10%, like 50, like what are we really doing? You're just still selling a product. So
Hmm.
is that maybe where that feeling is, where it's like, it's not
Yeah, that's
necessarily
definitely where it's from. And I think it's also it feels like what's the thing that people want, but it's like no, it's not enough representation. It feels like representation without, you know, change, without commitment, without like
actual
decision
efforts.
power. Exactly.
It's when a company says that we hire 60% of our employees are minorities, and meanwhile, everyone at the top with actual power is not.
Exactly.
It's like, that's a
Exactly.
great number to tell me. Who's
Yeah.
where?
It's
Where do they work? In your factories?
yeah, it's the optics for sure.
Oh, it, that's such an interesting conversation because then there's that you want to still highlight that person's story because it's the right thing to do, but how can you do that from a constructive way where it's not
Yeah.
bending or compromising the integrity of it?
Yeah. I think I have like I'm very hard to crack when it comes to that kind of content because in general, I have this disdain towards anyone going to Oaxaca and taking pictures of people without their permission, which is very ubiquitous.
Mhm.
Because I'm like, well, nobody's going to Europe and taking pictures of like white little children and elders and, like we're not, it just kind of for
Not Disney
me,
World.
hmm yeah. So it has that connotation for me. And that's why like on our social medias for Me Oaxaca, we don't really engage in using people's portraits in a way that doesn't feel good to us. We use them when there's intention behind it, but we could absolutely easily go to all the different regions of that we visited and take pictures of people and take pictures with the producers and look, this is their like another visit in the pueblo, or like in Mezcal, with Mezcal producers and blah blah blah. But it just feels like inauthentic.
That's fair. That's
Because I'd rather get a phone call or a voice note, right, from producers and be like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Like, when are you coming? Over like a picture with what, 10,000 likes or whatever, right? I'm being silly here, but like, I rather get a phone call. To me, it tells me that I'm building a relationship with people. Likes on social media doesn't tell me that necessarily. And then it's not too like, um, they're not mutually exclusive necessarily, but I have limited energy and I'd rather be able to hold conversation and connections and trust with people over like posting their faces on social media.
It's 100% fair. I think that each have their place. It's a means to an end sometimes to raise awareness because everyone loves to scroll through their phones, but it's everyone wakes up almost every morning just immediately attached. So it's that information we spoke about earlier, but there's more value in building an actual real relationship because it's
Yeah.
like they joke about it on social media. It's like you could see one of your posts could have 7,000 views and only like 10 likes. It's like, did it really have substance? Like, why you all looked like, so it could be something that should have helped and driven something, but it didn't really do anything. So is that really where the value should be at? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a funny thought. I know that we are running a little close. I know you have stuff to do. It's Friday. Don't want to keep you
Yeah, I
too.
got another 10 minutes.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
real briefly, I do want to, we talked about kind of just the education and pushing for change. A program I think is fun to highlight or interesting to highlight. It's the Introduction to Mezcal Through Indigenous Worldviews that you've piloted recently. This is a program with seasoned bartenders, or can you tell us a little bit about that program and how you want to, how that came to be?
Yeah. So we piloted the course in the fall of 2024,
Mhm.
and the majority of folks who joined are in the hospitality industry, not just the beverage, not just spirits, not just alcohol, but just food in general.
Mhm.
Because what we teach in the course is applicable to other cultural products, to corn, to cacao, to coffee, to certain dishes. Um, and then there's also been an interest to get more Oaxaqueños, Oaxacan folk living in diaspora, immigrant folk to join, just because there's also like a lack of deep understanding of what the industry, the mezcal industry, how it operates and why it is important for us to be engaged in it, to be aware of what is happening. But in general, so we've piloted we've done three cohorts. We're taking a pause this quarter or this semester, this season to take a break, to assess and evaluate how the last few courses have gone. I mean, we did, we're evaluation research oriented organization, so we've got quite a bit of work to do to understand like where is this making an impact? Are these the right objectives? Are these the right outcomes? Are these outcomes the ones that we really want to see changes in? So yeah, we are going to shift it so that it is more hospitality industry focused because that is where there is a lot of power that hospitality workers have. And they're also, as somebody who's worked in the hospitality understands that there's also inequities within that area. So yeah, but we're taking a bit of a break to revamp that.
Okay. Yeah, I felt that it was I do appreciate that approach as well because, like you said, those hospitality industries have a lot of connections to cultures that they're not from all the time. It
Yeah.
kind of,
And I think it's also based in my experience in going to, I don't go out too often, but when I do, and if it's a Mexican place, I'll definitely ask about the mezcal. I'm like, which one do you recommend? And 9 times out of 10, the servers don't know. They're just like anyone. And I'm like, no, you don't know. Or I'll ask simple questions like, tell me about this ensemble. Like, which magueyes does it have? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I gotta go ask. And I'm just like, well, you should know this. Like, you need training. Like, that's what I want. Like, like this sets an opportunity to like educate people because that's where hospitality workers, servers, bartenders, etc., have this opportunity to be like, oh, you like mezcal? Well, yeah, if you like this cocktail, can I interest you in something slightly different? And that's how you like introduce people to at least kind of like, yeah, I'm a parent. So, you got to introduce your child to like healthy foods or like greens. And it's like, okay, well, what if we put a little bit in here? And then it's like, oh, it turns out you like it. Anyways,
ease them into it. Like, here you go, try this
ease them
carrot.
into it.
Uh,
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah. Yeah.
So as we close out, there are maybe two, three questions. We'll see. That I'd like to ask, and you're specifically the perfect pairing. You said that your favorite meal is anything your mother makes, right? If she was cooking a traditional meal tonight, what's the one dish that you would absolutely require a copita of mezcal on the side?
Oh my God. I mean, anything that she makes, I know it's hard. It's super hard. Usually she asks me, what do you want me to make? When I'm about to go visit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually this dish called estofado because it's relatively simple to make. I'm also trying to be conscious. I don't want my mom to be like working too hard in the kitchen. So it's estofado. It's like a type of mole and that one. And it's like a tomato-based sauce.
Okay. Okay.
What mezcal?
Yeah.
I don't think anything that she has, anything that's available. It's not so much of like the pairing. I know that's where I'm not the best promoter of like organoleptic tasting oriented approach to imbibing in mezcal.
I completely understand because you are going to get the question now of what
Mhm.
what mezcals would you recommend to a friend or someone who wanted to try good, genuine mezcal?
Okay.
For
In
as
this
many as you
real
want.
world, in this real world, in like US market, um, my three are Tres Tiempos. That one is made in Amatlan in the Sierra Sur region
Mm-hmm.
in the Mi Oaxaca district. I like their ensamble and their tempestate a lot. They're available at quite a few of the places here in California. And then I would say Real Minero. Um, Graciela is like a great human, visited her several times. So, yeah, I think if people are into identity stuff and want to support like a woman-led brand, hers is great. And they do just great work around um,
Mm-hmm.
plant preservation. Yeah,
Yeah.
they have like this like really cool project of like ensuring that there's diversity of agave, of maguey.
Okay.
And then obviously I'm from Matatlán, so I can't not name somebody from my pueblo. That's available in the US, so that one would be Macurichos. They're also pretty good. And I've also visited. I just really like their organized and orderly way of like the visits.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the pride that they take in their work and like how they will show up and also like the boundaries that they set around like who their mezcal is and who their mezcal is not from. For, my bad. So yeah, for sure. Them three. In an ideal world where there were no brands,
No brands.
or where like brands were not the center of, the industry, um, it would be like it would be great to be able to like name a brand. This is so what do you call it? Utopian of me.
Yeah.
But it would just be great to be able to say like, oh, can I have a mezcal from X producer or X region? So we're giving credit to people and places and not names or brands that are mostly made up by white men. Not all, sometimes they rent out the names from the producers themselves, but that's a different story.
I was just the same. Like sometimes they just borrow, quote unquote, borrow
I
the
got
name.
so much
Oh, no. Hey, if you didn't have to go, I have 256 gigs to go. But, so definitely want to bring you back on whenever you get a chance. I think that a lot of what you brought up today is going to resonate with a lot of my listeners, especially when to completely share just kind of with us, it's as a minority in the industry with spirits and podcasting and talking about bourbon and whiskeys and all that stuff. It's kind of the representation matters. So I think a lot of my listeners resonate with something that's deeper than just a label. And it's fantastic to hear it from you. Where can anyone find you, support you? I know you have programs that you're also promoting. We have, I have a list of stuff that I'll put on the show notes. But
yeah, I appreciate that. MiOaxaca.org. That's MI, and then Oaxaca is OAXACA. MiOaxaca.org. For our Instagram, the handle is mi.oaxaca. And then for me as an individual, you can visit oaxacthetalk.com, and that's just more of my writing, some of my speaking engagements, or to book me. Same thing with Instagram or social media. Oaxaca the Talk.
I love that name.
Yeah.
Oaxaca the Talk. That's a fantastic name.
Thank you.
Yeah. We didn't even get to talk about the fact that you're an author, everything like that.
Not yet. I know. I don't know why or who said that or why. I'm like, wait, I'm not an author. Why would you guys say that about me? That clearly did not go. I did not sign off on that. I'm not an author yet. I'm working on it. And it's just, one of those things, like I said earlier, I'm like, I'm working on too many written pieces. Do I write about motherhood? Do I write about my experiences as a first-time ED and running a nonprofit? Yeah. There's a lot of drafts sitting that I need to organize.
It's fine. You'll get to it. You don't sleep.
I will. I absolutely will.
But Fabiola, thank you for coming on the show and spending some time with us. Love to get you back on at some point. I will write down those 3 brands and see if I can get them anytime soon and see what we could do. But everyone listening at home, make sure that you give her a like, follow, subscribe, learn more about what's behind the label. Do yourself that favor, right? Like half of what we're doing, if we're consuming something, know that it's coming from a genuine source. It's telling you the truth on the label and that you're happy with those search results. Click like, subscribe, drink responsibly, share some memories with some friends, try something in the kitchen, because apparently now I'm hungry as hell after talking to Fabiola.
No.
Take care of yourselves. Go ahead.
I was the same. I'm hungry too. So,
all right, take care, guys. She's got to eat. Bye. Hey, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by Burn Termite and Pest Control. I first met Joe Byrne on Full Frontal Nerdity Show and decided to give his company a try. They have been the best pest service I've ever had. From flexible scheduling, attention to detail, fair pricing, and everything you love about a small business, I highly recommend Joe Byrne and Burn Termite and Pest Control. It's a family-owned and operated business with over 30 years of experience in termite and pest. You can reach Burn Termite and Pest Control at 321-297-7985. Once again, 321-297-7985. And let them know Bourbon and Bullshit sent you. Thanks, guys. See you next time.